Imagine you're scrolling through Reddit late at night and you come across something that feels wrong. Not a classic disturbing video, not a post you can easily explain. No, something that was truly never meant to be seen. Something that unsettles you in a way you can't shake and makes you wonder who posted it and why. Today, we're diving into the corners of Reddit that are untouched. The posts, the notes, and the stories that Reddit tries to hide. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And now let's dive in and uncover some of Reddit's unseen horrors. The Schuylkill Notes. I have a friend that works as a chef in Philadelphia. We were talking about Reddit recently, and I was asking him about different topics I could cover for this video. And as we're talking, he goes, "Have you covered the Schuylkill Notes already?" And I'd never heard of that before. And I tell him as much. His eyes light up and he starts frantically searching for a picture. One he can't seem to find. And I'm sitting there asking him, "What the hell are the Schuylkill Notes?" And my friend replies, "My restaurant got one." About 2 years ago, when he was a young sous chef working at a local Philadelphia restaurant, I won't say which one, I don't want to dox him, but it's a very popular restaurant. He was prepping food for that night's dinner service when the delivery truck came. Now, for those of you who don't know how a restaurant works, about twice a week, restaurants get shipments of food from distributors. They come in large cardboard boxes, dozens and dozens of them, and the kitchen staff are responsible for breaking them down and unloading the grocery. They're often from the same company, from the same place, and the whole affair is standard kitchen work. Nothing out of the ordinary. So while my friend is prepping, the other cooks are unloading. They open up the boxes, stock the shelves, the freezer, the walk-in, organizing by date and time so the oldest food gets used first. First in, first out, my friend calls it. After about an hour, one of the chefs calls him over. "Look at this," the chef says. Inside one of the sealed boxes, a note typed onto a small piece of paper. It contained a series of insane ramblings about RFK, Social Security, the Eiffel Tower, all disguised by a dense, complicated code. He never did find the photo, but he linked me to a niche subreddit with very few views, dedicated to those users who found notes of their own. And needless to say, I've been honestly losing my mind over this. This is one of the most disturbing and perplexing mysteries I have ever dived into, and the implication of what it all means is honestly horrifying. Now let's go back to 2018. A user named Mattis makes a post to r/WTF titled, "Found the ramblings of a schizophrenic conspiracy theorist in my driveway after I got home from work today. I have so many questions." The body of the post is a single picture. The user is holding a yellowed note in his hand. Now the text is a little convoluted, so I'm reading for clarity here. The note begins with one word, in big black bold. "Lies, terrorism, drug importing, and illegal immigration are destabilizing efforts of secret societies. Churchill, writing on destabilization, said the Illuminati is the root of every subversive movement of the 19th century. Socialism, Islamic terrorism, university radicalism, public education, and the KKK grew out of the Illuminati. It includes the Vatican and its SS, Jesuits, Masons, etc., working with SS from other religions." The note continues to rant about racist conspiracy theory propaganda, and the user is rightly confused. So are the people in the comments. They talk about how this man must be crazy. There are plenty of crazies just like him. Some nurses and social workers tune in, sharing their own experiences with similar notes and drawings. But one user comments something strange. "Did you find this in Pennsylvania by chance? I've come across this exact paper a few times in town. No one knows where they are coming from." And then the OP replies saying, "I did actually. I'm about 45 minutes out of Harrisburg." The commenter too is nearby. He lives in Williamsport, which is about an hour away from Harrisburg, just 15 minutes further from the OP. To them, This is not a coincidence. It's creepy. Someone is leaving these notes in their Pennsylvania neighborhood, and it's been happening for a while. Someone else joins the conversation. Entertained by the story and the proximity between these two accounts, he makes a recommendation. You two should assemble a ragtag group of neighborhood vigilantes and get to the bottom of this. None of these people knew that this user had just posted the first online account of a massive nationwide mystery that would become more convoluted and dangerous than anyone could have possibly imagined. And nobody's talking about it because nobody knows. 5 years later, a community of internet sleuths create a subreddit dedicated to hunting this person down and trying to decipher one of Pennsylvania's biggest unknown mysteries, the radical, illegible notes that we now call the Schuylkill Notes. So, what are the Schuylkill Notes? Well, the note I began reading to you, the first one ever officially found, was something of a proto-note. It's mostly legible. The ideas it was trying to communicate were much more clear, but as the years went on, more notes began to surface. Clearly by the same author. They were written in the same font, text, and about the same size as the original notes. And here's an example of one of the new notes. And I'm not going to read you any of this, firstly, because it's mostly just symbols mixed in with actual words that are compressed into unintelligible garbage, but the content of it is insane. In it, we see similar themes to the first note, but it's become much more unhinged. And these notes are everywhere. People have found them all across the eastern United States, mostly in Pennsylvania, but others have been found as far away as Germany. And as we scroll through the subreddit, we see 10 notes, 20 notes, 50, 100. At first, people were finding them in the woods, along natural trails. Most of these were discovered tied up in trees in rural Pennsylvania, under benches, on rocks, or wrapped in plastic. Someone posts, found a note in Auburn, Pennsylvania, shortly after Christmas. It was wrapped in plastic with a paperclip, then thumbtacked to a tree trunk behind a leaf. I did not unwrap since I already found several in Landingville a few years ago. Found my second note on the Appalachian Trail this past month. The first one was just outside of Duncannon, and this one was about 8 miles NOBO in from 183. Others found them in facilities, or in the pockets of thrift store clothing. Found in the bathroom at the Rockport access point. Found in a pair of pants I got at Jubilee. Super freaky, man. Just found it on the floor in my house randomly. And the consensus is the same. These notes clearly were not written by any sane person. Whoever it is, they've got some serious mental health issues. In the prevalence of the notes, the disparity between locations, and the sheer number of them indicates a very obsessive, unhinged individual. Someone says it's clearly someone who is very mentally ill wanting to spread their message. And for a while, that's all it was. Some crazy person with an agenda, a printer, and a lot of free time, trying to spread their doctrine as far and as wide as possible. But as time went on, more notes began to surface. The message continued to devolve into garbled mania, and things were about to get a lot scarier. And just like my friend the chef, people began finding notes in their food. Energy drink mix, Cheez-Its, cookies, pasta boxes, Crystal Light, and the list goes on and on. And now this brings up a very unsettling fact. Somehow, some way, this man was getting access to sealed food products. And to understand the real gravity of this situation, we need to discuss another case, one from almost 30 years earlier. So let's roll back the clock. September 29th, 1982, Chicago, Illinois. 12-year-old Mary Kellerman, who should be getting ready for school, is instead being comforted by her parents. When she woke up, it was obvious she wasn't feeling well. Runny nose, a sore throat, and a bad headache. Most likely, she has a cold. People described her as easy to be around. She's a happy, warm, normal little girl, Everyone loves seeing her at school, but today she'll need to stay home. Her father, Dennis, gives her something to ease her uncomfortable symptoms and tells her to go back to bed. Get some rest. You'll feel better tomorrow. But for little Mary, there would be no tomorrow. A couple of minutes later, Dennis hears the sound of a terrible fall. He rushes to his daughter's side and finds her convulsing on the floor, still in her pajamas. Medical services are called and Mary is rushed to the hospital, but there's no saving her. At approximately 9:56 a.m., she's pronounced dead. The cause? Poisoning, but not just any poison, potassium cyanide, one of the strongest and most deadly poisons on planet Earth. In the coming days, 6 more people would die mysteriously, all of them poisoned. All of them potassium cyanide. Investigators soon discovered a common thread between all of these victims. They had all been feeling a little sick, and they'd all taken extra strength Tylenol. Mary Kellerman was the first victim in what is now known as the 1982 Tylenol poisonings. An investigation followed shortly thereafter, but no person has ever been convicted of the crime, and today there are no leads. It remains one of the most disturbing and devastating mysteries in modern American history, and because of this, millions of bottles of Tylenol were pulled from grocery shelves, and come November of the same year, all food and drug products were required to institute tamper-proof seals. What that means is, no one outside of manufacturing could ever tamper with our food or our medications ever again. At least, that was the idea. But the very existence of the Schuylkill Notes presents a very serious and obvious problem. Some psycho has access to the things we eat, and whoever the person is, no matter their intentions, they are in a very dangerous and powerful position. Sure, right now, the Schuylkill Notes are exactly what they are: insane little notes, a string of crazy ramblings and disturbing opinions. But what happens if they don't get the reaction they want? I mean, these notes are being put out for a reason, right? Nobody goes around and prints hundreds of consistent but unique notes, places them in hundreds of different places, miles and miles apart, in every public and private location imaginable for no reason. So, what's the goal? And what are people doing to stop this from escalating into another nationwide tragedy? Well, to understand the why, we first have to understand the notes themselves, and thankfully, the group on r/Schuylkill Notes has done some amateur sleuthing. There's a couple of theories, but I'm more aligned with this user, NonSkew2, who dives into the mindset of a person like this. He writes, "In the originals, not the copycats, it's all about connections. Some of them are obvious to anyone who has a cursory knowledge of conspiracy theories. Often can be true or can be unprovable. Some are a bit deeper, and some really seem to be the result of psychosis. Alternatively, they could be the person's own conspiracy ideas, which in the past, even more than now, conspiracy theory has been equated to nut job. Not to create the longest run-on sentence, but this is just a small surface-level example of the stream of consciousness you have to be on. The thoughts come, are connected, and have to be written down. The mind swirls while connections are being made, causing the swirling to slow, until solidified into a subliminally concrete list of connections. Now help is needed and people need to know. They must be shown the connections within this realm and how they connect to others. I have to fulfill my purpose, my urgent desire. More can join and make connections. Someone may have their eyes opened." And I agree. When we look at these notes, we see a lot of this stream of consciousness, and all of it revolves around secret societies, the dangers present and the ones that come from over there. Agents of chaos conditioning us to be controlled. Every nation on earth, every culture, every religion, Hinduism and Islam, Europe and China, celebrities like Oprah, Elon, Obama, organizations like the CIA, the NSA, industry leaders like Domino's Pizza and Pepsi Cola, then more dangerous implications, Illuminati, mafia, or crime. The author makes his claim, plain as day. our number one enemies. Now, if you're confused, so am I. But I'm not asking you to understand the content. No one can. It's almost impossible. But we can understand the purpose. This man, whoever he is scared. Most conspiracy theorists are. They feel under fire, oftentimes from unseen forces. And it's clear to me, and most of the users on r/Schuylkill Notes, that this man wants to open our eyes to whatever danger is out there, which in turn makes this person all the more dangerous. They've already gone to extreme lengths to make sure we hear him, but what comes next? If he doesn't get the response he wants, what's the next move? Let's talk about another problem, one that's debated over and over again in this Reddit thread. How are the notes being placed? The outdoor ones are obvious. Someone goes around and strings them up, pins them to trees, whatever. But what about the food? How is it getting into the food? Well, people have different theories, one of which aligns with the Tylenol poisonings. You see, whoever committed the Tylenol poisonings had a system. They would buy a bottle of Tylenol, poison a capsule, then return the product. The store would restock the returned product, and their murderous plan was in motion. And some people believe that's what's happening with these Schuylkill Notes. This is 100% the case. I have experience working in the food industry and actually did some investigation into consumer complaints on these notes back in 2021 through 2022 timeframe. There are a couple of key factors. Complaints are coming from products made by multiple companies. Even when from the same company, they come from multiple factories and production lines. Although not impossible, it's highly improbable that someone would have that level of access across multiple companies and factories. Sneaking a note into packaging at the factory is logistically quite hard. Most packaging equipment is covered with protective shielding for employee or food safety reasons. It often has multiple employees working in the same area with visibility to what people are doing. For packaging, like cardboard cartons, they are folded and formed inside the machine merely seconds before filling. Most complaints I investigated had commonalities in the region or state where the complaint came from. In my case, roughly 80% from small communities in southeast Pennsylvania, north of Baltimore. These correspond to where notes were found in public places like hiking trails. Many complaints came from packaging that didn't need to be resealed to hide or insert the note. Coffee tin lids can be removed and replaced while keeping the induction seal that protects the coffee intact. Cardboard lids can be folded and glued in different ways that can, in some cases, leave a small gap where paper can be inserted. Now, all of this makes perfect sense, and it might be true, but I'll remind you of my chef friend. When we first talked, I asked him, what was the state of the box? Did it look tampered with? Was there some sign that a person had gotten into it outside of the manufacturing? And his answer was no. It was sealed, exactly like the rest. Taped, secured, untampered with. This wasn't a box of pasta or a pack of cookies. It was food sent directly from the manufacturing company in bulk. It wasn't on a shelf, and it wasn't accessible by the public. It was completely inaccessible. And this is consistent with all of the evidence presented on the Reddit thread. Most users comment with their pictures, something along the lines of, found inside a sealed box. This is also supported by the incredible distance between locations where people have found these Schuylkill Notes. Here's a map, visualizing some of the user-reported locations. For those of you listening, we've got a spread that ranges from as far as Illinois, as far south as the Carolinas, and as far north as Maine. I'll also remind you all, a user reported finding one in an Aldi in Hamburg, Germany. So the odds of this being at store level, in my opinion, is low. So if it isn't happening at store level, that means it's happening sometime between manufacturing, packaging, and shipping. Okay, how? Well, about a year ago, someone made a startling connection. User Please Listen in Here writes, found connections by researching the companies and brands that each note is found in. Hello, new here, and I'm sure this has already been mentioned perhaps. If not, I wanted to jump in. Junior Mints, Mac and Cheese, Dunkaroos, and Skinny Pop were the first I researched, and all were owned by Nabisco, with Hershey's owning Skinny Pop. I also found that there's a Nestle beef between Nabisco especially, and not sure if it is relevant. All of these food brands are owned by Nabisco. Could this be happening possibly from a factory worker, slipping these into boxes while packaging? This to me seems like a step in the right direction. Users have posted finding the notes in these products, and all of them are owned by Nabisco. Now, is it possible that Nabisco just owns a lot of products and the notes are still going in randomly? Sure, but the connection is hard to deny. Is it possible that somehow, some way, a factory worker is introducing the notes during the manufacturing process at Nabisco? Well, it just so happens there's a very famous Nabisco factory in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That would make sense then, why these products are predominantly found within 50 miles of Philly. At least it would if the factory hadn't shut down in 2015 and later demolished in 2016. So what about the delivery process? Maybe they're being slipped in that way, from a more distant factory? Well, some people believe it might be a truck driver, someone with relatively easy access to multiple packages in bulk, with plenty of time to tamper with the products. This would explain why there's such a large geographical spread, and it would also align with my friend's personal experience. While some people are certain that it is, in fact, a truck driver, others aren't so sure. User freeborn_247 makes a good point. Quote, I work in retail and have worked for multiple retail companies. The odds that it's a truck driver are slim due to the fact that 99% of deliveries have a welded bolt placed through the doors. The driver cannot open that bolt, it takes bolt cutters, without the receiver or other associates present. They typically ask, can I break the seal? If the seal's already broken, when they arrive the shipment can be refused and they more than likely will lose their jobs. So the likelihood that a driver is tampering is very low. So, we don't know how the notes are getting into the packaging, which is terrifying. It could be happening anywhere by any means, and we have no idea where to start. Plenty of theories, very little evidence. And none of these theories leave room for the notes that are found on the ground. The ones found in the parks, the woods, under benches, in thrift shop clothing. All of this implies there's at least one person placing notes physically, moving from location to location with dozens of notes, planting them like little Easter eggs for people to find. And that makes me think, maybe it is happening at store level. But then, how did my friend find one in a box straight from the manufacturer? Not just his experience, there was a guy who found his Schuylkill note in a sealed bag of Lucky Charms. Every time I try to wrap my head around this, the how of it all, I end up with more questions than I do answers. So maybe we have to start somewhere else. Like the notes themselves? Maybe there's something about the actual physical notes that can give us a clue as to what's going on and who's behind it all. Well, one of the first big leads I found was printer steganography. For those of you who don't know, most modern printers are set to produce a secret microscopic code called the Machine Identification Code, or MIC. This code was implemented in the 1980s when companies like Xerox and Canon became worried that their printers were being used to print counterfeit bills. Law enforcement wasn't happy, and they needed a way to protect themselves from the ensuing trouble this might have caused. So they began implementing a new technology: tiny, imperceivable yellow dots, planted imperceptibly throughout the page. Each printer has a unique combination, with no two printers having the same design. If a criminal used a printer to counterfeit money, the yellow dots would allow law enforcement to track down the exact printer, and in turn, the criminal. And for the mysterious Schuylkill notes, one user decided to investigate the paper itself, hoping it would provide useful information. Here are his findings. There is no MIC on the note I received. I took macro photos of a Schuylkill note and a piece of paper printed with a color printer to act as my control. I used high CRI lighting and a UV light to try and isolate any yellow tracking dots. I processed these in Lightroom to boost saturation and luminosity of yellow hues to make tracking dots easier to see. My method works, as you can easily see the tracking dots on the control piece of paper. There are no discernible tracking dots on this Schuylkill note, which leads to 3 possible conclusions. Number 1, the notes are printed using a black and white printer. Number 2, the notes are printed using a color printer that did not implement MIC. And number 3, the notes are photocopied, which may erase MIC. This still requires the copier to match one of the 2 above options. Additionally, this is only based on a single note. I would like others to send me notes, ideally older ones, to see if my findings are consistent. I also believe I found a way to identify the authenticity of these notes, and I'd like to confirm that. If you have a note, please consider sending it my way. You're actually joking, right? There is no discernible information from the papers themselves. None. And not even that. We don't even know how there's no MIC dots. There are 3 theories about just the dots themselves. Guys, this entire case is crazy. It's like a hydra. You answer one question and 3 more questions take its place. And I'm sure by this point, like me, you're starting to feel a little hopeless. But right in that paragraph, he makes an interesting observation. One that brings us to yet another question. OP said, I also believe I found a way to identify the authenticity of these notes. What does that mean? Authenticity. Well, it means that some people think not all of these Schuylkill notes are genuine notes. In other words, there might be copycats. Which brings us to our next question. Who? Well, the copycat theory crops up a lot of posts on this subreddit. Throughout this video, I've sort of been referring to this perpetrator as a single person, but if you really look at all the information we do have, it starts to feel like the only way this could happen on such a large scale across multiple years is if multiple people are producing these Schuylkill notes. But once again, the jury is out. One of the main arguments against the copycat theory is why? Why would anyone have a reason to even copy the notes and claim them as actual genuine notes? Sure, if this was a big profile case, there would probably be copycats. But the Schuylkill notes haven't really gained any mainstream media attention outside of Reddit. And even then, the posts of Schuylkill notes get like 30 upvotes at best. That's it. This isn't a groundbreaking story. Even on YouTube, only one video about these Schuylkill notes has more than 100,000 views. All of the others have like 7,000 views. Nobody is talking about this. Nobody is discussing it. And nobody seems to care. So what reason would there even be for a copycat? You won't go viral. You won't get famous. Maybe you might piss some people off, which is possible, but at the same time, there are hundreds of notes. Hell, maybe even thousands at this point, which creates a couple of equally unlikely options. A, the copycats do exist and are creating their own notes for whatever reason, their own twisted pleasure, I guess. Or B, the copycats do not exist and there's one crazy guy printing thousands of notes. Neither of these are really great options, but there's one other possibility, and that is, what if there's multiple people, not copycats, but a group of people creating these Schuylkill notes en masse? Well, as I was researching, I came across your typical Schuylkill notes post. A guy takes a walk on a wildlife trail and finds 3 notes. But this guy, I think, has one of the craziest pieces of evidence on the entire subreddit. 70 upvotes, 1 comment, and a groundbreaking clue. He writes, "Hey everyone, I found a Schuylkill note in my gummies, and now I found 3 with my family on a trail. We saw 2 people, one guy wearing a dark green tee, black hair, 6'2", bigger guy, glasses, late 30s to 40s, and an older guy, 60s, hunter-esque attire with the pointy goatee and stash, around 5'10". I said, hey, to the both of them. So if one of those people was one of you, I hope you're doing great. Anyway, here's more notes. One was tacked under a leaf, one was tied, and one was just sitting on a log, which had to have just been placed because of how windy it was. We saw the older dude maybe 60 feet away from it. 2 are the same. 1 is different. There's the critical piece of evidence. Right there. In this seemingly ordinary post, a family is walking in the woods. They spot 2 men near a cache of 3 Schuylkill notes. The men don't respond when greeted, and one of the notes was just resting on a log. If the OP is telling the truth, and the day really was windy, then he'd be correct. The note would not have been able to stay on top of the log, which means the 2 men must have placed the notes. If this is true, that would mean there are multiple people creating these Schuylkill notes. Personally, I think that explains a lot of the discrepancies we've covered so far. How can this be happening all across the eastern US? Where are the notes being produced? How is it getting into the food boxes? Why are they doing it? When does a single person have the time to produce hundreds of notes? Well, all of these questions can be explained if there are multiple people. Some people are slipping them into boxes at store level, others are slipping them into manufacturing or during shipping, some are printing the notes themselves, others are walking through the woods, dropping 10 notes, 20 notes across miles and miles. One takes a trip, say to the Niagara Falls or to Germany, they leave Schuylkill notes. One goes down south to visit family, they leave a Schuylkill note. I think this is much more devastating than the copycat theory, because if this is multiple people, we've evolved out of the it's just a crazy person in the woods idea. If this is true, there is a team of lunatics out there, conspiracy theorists with a harrowing, disturbing rhetoric, making a call to action for anyone that thinks like them, speaks like them, believes like them. This theory brings the whole story to one terrifying crescendo. Premeditated, intentional propagandizing. Join us against the enemy. Fight the powers that be, the evil among us. And they're advertising in our food. They have access to our dried goods, our cereals, and our cookies, our neighborhood stores, our factories, our friends and family across multiple states and across hundreds of miles. And if this theory is correct, then we've all got something to worry about. The FBI and the Food and Drug Administration have, apparently, been investigating these Schuylkill notes for a couple of years now. Just recently, they've begun showing up on news channels across the greater Philadelphia area. But the really scary fact is, we have no information, no answers, nothing. No one has been caught in connection with the notes. We don't know what's going on. All we know is that whoever's doing this right now is in an extremely powerful and possibly catastrophic position, and no one seems to be talking about it. The subreddit, even with its dedicated amateur sleuthing, its rigorous mapping, and energetic community, gets almost no views. No one is paying attention to this. Before my friend told me, I'd never heard of this before. None of my friends or family have heard of this. And just like the Tylenol poisonings, whoever is perpetrating the mass distribution of Schuylkill notes has immediate access to all of our food. It isn't happening like it did in 1982. It's not just one product. It's dozens of products across dozens of stores by multiple companies. And like I just said moments ago, that is genuinely terrifying. That means that completely sealed food that should be 100% fine could be contaminated by these people. and you would never know, because nobody knows anything. Personally, I believe lots of things about this case. I believe it's multiple people. I believe it's happening at the factory level, but really, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what anyone thinks or believes. The fact of the matter is, this is not good. And the longer this is allowed to go on, I suspect it will continue to get more extreme and more dangerous. At the beginning of this story, I told you the notes have been evolving. Over the years, they've gotten crazier, less reasonable, and more demented. Sure, right now it's just a bunch of crazy notes, but what happens when that isn't enough? What happens if they want to communicate a more devastating message? We could be looking at another case of the Tylenol poisonings, but this time it won't be 8 victims. It could be hundreds. And I also asked earlier, what is anyone doing to stop this from happening? Well, other than the dedication of Redditors we've seen throughout this video, it doesn't look like very much. There's no word from the FBI, the FDA, the police, nothing. No leads, no media attention, no call to action. I don't think it's a crazy thing to say. Nobody is taking this seriously. At least nobody is treating it like a serious situation. More people should be talking about this. More people should be concerned. This entire story should be viral right now, but it isn't, and that's incredibly frustrating and more than a little concerning. I feel like it's just me and 20 Redditors who actually recognize the gravity of this situation. That this is dangerous, and it could quickly spiral out of control and into a nationwide tragedy, but nobody seems to care. And that, to me, is the most horrifying thing of all. And it looks like to me, for at least the foreseeable future, this won't be solved anytime soon. So hopefully this video can help kickstart some movement and help people realize that crazies have access to our food supply. Please share the video to friends and family to help raise awareness. And please like the video and subscribe to the channel to boost the video in the algorithm. Thank you all so much for watching, and leave your theories down below. And this was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye.